All right, hi everyone. Thanks for joining back. Surprisingly, the first video actually had really good feedback and a lot of attention to it, so I really wanted to make a follow-up video. I told you guys that I wanted to be able to give you a little bit of a deeper dive into that Seeker T3 build, but what I really want to talk about today, kind of tying into the conversation yesterday, is really focusing on your skills and how to utilize them correctly. So. We'll probably spend a lot more time today in the actual game versus quest log, just because we're going to be looking at the skills, the specializations for the skills, depending on how long this video is going to be. I guess the other one was an hour. I might cut off masteries for another video. I could tell you that my skills have not changed since T2. I've only adjusted one thing since then, pretty much. But everything else, apart from that, has actually stayed the same. I haven't really changed much. So I think these are very universal. I really don't think there's a whole lot of variation that should be happening against this. There might be a couple things you'll have different just depending on your playstyle and your party comp. But this is what I'm going to recommend for Seekers in T3. So we're going to pull up our skills. So first of all, the first thing I want to talk about today is the number one, the most important, and the best skill on your entire skill bar, and that's your Q block. Now, funny joke, I actually changed my Q block to V because I played Guild Wars 2 for a very long time, so that's just natural for me. My V is my Q block, so you'll see that here. Your Q block, you absolutely want it to be the wand block. You do not want to be using the longbow block. I think the only time you possibly should look at using the longbow block is if you're using evasion, just because it does give you a pretty substantial boost to your melee and magic and ranged evasion. But if you are running any kind of endurance, anything other than evasion, you should absolutely never use the longbow Q block. Now, what you should be using is the wand block, and here's the reason why the wand block is probably the best block in the entire game, even above SNS in my opinion. Um, my playstyle revolves around my Q block extensively. Is the number one thing that you should be practicing on your own when you want to get better in PvP in the game. And the reason why is because one Q block does two things, and a third is just because of a Q block. Number one, it has about a 2.1 second duration of Q block, and what I mean by that is when you actually stand still and hit the Q button essentially, your character is immune that entire time you're casting that. So if I'm getting hit from enemies, and I'll try to demonstrate that at some point in this video, if you're getting hit by enemies, they're going to be doing 0 damage to you during the duration of that standing still Q block. The other huge benefit of the Q block is it restores stamina when you perfect block standing still. That's huge. You can kind of see here the resource cost for the Q block to be initiated is 35 stamina. It recovers 29 of the 35. You only need like an extra second or two in order to regenerate that remaining stamina. And so you can pretty much almost infinitely Q block back to back to back if you are perfect in Q blocks. The other thing, the one Q block actually has a pretty wide open on the perfect block timing. I find it's easier to perfect block with the one Q block than a lot of the other Q blocks out there. If you're a DPS player, you play DPS and you play on Dagger, for example, you will notice a huge difference in the one Q block just based on the duration and the forgiveness that it provides. The other nice thing about one Q block is the fact that it heals you. So it actually is a pretty substantial heal. I'm not going to go test it right now. You can test it on your own, but I want to say that the one Q block typically is like a 7 to 10,000 heal, depending on Blessed Barrier and depending on all your stacks and Saint's Oath and all those sorts of things going. But the one Q block, the main number one reason why you're going to run the one Q block is because the stamina recovery and the healing effect that you're able to give it. Now, the one thing I will warn you, and this is something that I've had to practice and kind of adapt to my playstyle, when I was a newer player and didn't really understand what was going on around me and I was just so focused about surviving, I would succeed in my Q blocks and perfect. But what I found is I would not reuse the skill right away, which is kind of a big issue because if you don't reuse the skill, you don't regenerate the stamina, and you also do not initiate the heal. So what I've recently done and what I've gotten really good at, it's just as second nature for myself, is I'll Q block perfect it, and then I have a hotkey which on my skill bar is X, which is removing my friendly target. I don't know if I have anyone in town. I'll try to hunt someone down when I'm talking. But all that's going to be able to do is remove who I'm targeting, so that way my heal and my stam recovery skill is not out of range of anybody. Because if my DPS players, line of sighted from me, if they're too far away from my location, the wand Q block will not be able to be used, and then you don't regenerate the stamina and you don't regenerate the healing as well. So wand Q block, I know it's a long conversation on Q block, and I promise you a lot of the other skills will be a lot quicker than that. One Q block is a must. Like anyone that asks me for advice on their build, they want to see what I'm talking about or what I'm running. The number one thing I'm looking for is what Q block if you're using, and if you're using the longbow block, I'm sorry, you need to switch. Like I said, the only exception to the longbow block is maybe evasion players, but I've never ran evasion seekers, so I'll let somebody else decide that, and you can mention that in the comments or whatever. But I would personally 100% of the time use the wand Q block. So I did forget one thing I did want to talk about, and this is hugely important, and this actually ties in with the Q block ability. Now, I'm actually recording this at the very end of my video, so I'm going to be inserting into wherever the section is. I'm going to be doing that. The one thing about the Q block is because that's restoring your stamina, you actually will want to be using this energy stone, the CC removal stone. A lot of you are probably using the blue version, which is what I was using in T2 as well for a while. That does the 30% healing or whatever it is. The problem is it's impacted by heal cut, which you will have a lot of if you're using your CC stone, probably, whether it be from guillotine or scorpions or everything in the world. So what this allows you to do is it restores your stamina by 50, which means you immediately have a Q block available to you. So if you think about it, right, you Q block, you get stunned afterwards, you CC stone, you Q block again, that's another 2 seconds of immunity. It's fantastic. If you perfect block, then you get another 2 seconds of immunity because you get a stamina restore ability. So I personally recommend using the green CC stone just because it's fantastic because it restores stamina. If you are dying to scorpions, learning this skill and timing it with stamina restore and so forth is the only way to survive scorpions. I promise you. I have tested so many hours with scorpions. The only way to beat them is getting very comfortable with your Q block. That is why I also on my bar have Mushroom Stew as a hotkey, because Mushroom Stew is a stamina restore. Now, the bad thing about Mushroom Stew is it has the same timer as your stone, so there's really not much of an opportunity to use it. It's probably more used for like gliding and stuff, but it is there if you ever need it. There's the rare situation where a scorpion might be hitting you and they're not proccing your CC stone, and you might just go to this. Very impressive if you're able to pull that off. But it's an added benefit to have this available because it's stamina, which is a Q block. The other thing I want to mention about Q block real quick is I only use my Q block standing still in PvP. I almost never roll with my Q block unless I'm like getting pulled by tanks and I'm trying to like move out of like the absolute shit, and I value the movement like distance of the Q block versus me being slowed down. You always almost want to be permanently using standing still Q block. It's just way too much value benefit. While the duration of the Q block, you're immune to CCs, which then means that your healing touches, your flash waves you have on you, your nature's blessings, all these sorts of buffs during that 2 seconds of Q block, that's 8,000 healing. So you don't need to worry about your healing while you're in Q block because you're going to be taking all these passive regenerations. If you drop that fountain defensively, then you go into your Q block, I mean, you're just adding more healing. Like, you don't need to worry about your self-sustain so much if you're timing your Q blocks very well. And use them, be open to using it more frequently. Like, if you think you're going to be a target of somebody, use it. Don't wait until you're already stunned to try to start spamming Q block. You want to be using it preemptively is the word I was trying to think of a minute. Now, jumping into some easier conversations. I think pretty much every dedicated PvP healer should be running this exact skill bar right here. Your order can obviously change depending on your preference, but I don't think there should be any variation in what skills you're taking. So I'm not going to sit here and talk about, Touch of Despair. I'm not going to talk about Curse Explosion. I'm not going to talk about Sleep. And the reason why is because you're never going to choose those skills. You're just never going to bring them into a fight. You're never going to bring them. There's no point talking about them. So we're going to kind of go through my skill bar here. Some of these actually probably are ranked, in the order that are very important to some degree, but um, these are going to be what we're going to talk about. So let's talk about the very first one, which is Deadly Marker. So Deadly Marker is a very interesting skill. I know not a lot of people are using it in T2 and T3. I think it's a must carry for any Seeker in PvP. If you are a Seeker in a kill squad or you're playing with a DPS focused party, it's even more reason why you should be bringing Deadly Marker. The Deadly Marker is not there to build hit chance for your DPS players. That is your DPS player's job to build their own builds correctly. The purpose of the Deadly Marker is to shield cut enemy targets. What happens when you deploy a Deadly Marker onto a target, um, any incoming shields to them at that point are 80% less. So if a Oracle was supposed to be giving them a 10,000 shield, which is very easy in T3, their shield's only going to be, I'm horrible at math, sorry, I'm guessing like 2,000, right? So 2,000 in shield will get instantly deleted by a good DPS player. 10,000 shield plus their health is going to be a very tanky player. You want to deploy Deadly Marker as frequently as possible and as consistently as possible. Now here's the problem with us talking about that, is when I played in T2 and very early into T3, I had a really bad habit of not really worried who I was targeting at the time when I'm talking about like an enemy. So a lot of times I would just have tanks targeted for whatever particular reason. I might have like the random enemy healer targeted for whatever reason, because it wasn't like I was doing skills that relied on me having appropriate enemy targets marked. In T2, or sorry, in T3, it's really important that you are being observant on who you are targeting, because Deadly Marker is a weaken check. Now here's the cool thing. You can see here, Deadly Marker is a 100% chance to apply. Deadly Marker does not impact any damage, so it does not roll against hit. So a player can have 5,000 ranged evasion. It does not matter because it does not roll against evasion. It only rolls against weaken resistance. Now, what players are running no weaken resistance? DPS players. So what you want to be using this skill for is in the very early portion of an engagement or while your party is fighting. You want to be deploying these on the enemy DPS players, especially the DPS players that are being pocketed. If there's an enemy Scorpion and you guys are like, oh my god, he has so much Oracle shielding going on with him, we can't eat through it. Well, you need to be deadly markering that. Like, that is your DPS. They might have some opportunity as well, but your job at that point is to deadly marker that Scorpion and let your team know in comms, hey, deadly marker on, Easy, who's a Scorpion, right? And at that point, your DPS need to be target prioritizing off your deadly marker. If you're in a PvP seeker and right now traditionally you've been very quiet in comms, that's the DPS and a tank's job to call clumps and call different targets and things like that. You need to kind of break out of your box a little bit and get a little bit more comfortable having those communications. This is something that I call out almost every single time I use it. So I'm telling my team, hey, this is who you need to be targeting right now because they're at their weakest point they're going to be in this fight. And there are other builds out there that do have shield cut and they are effective at shield cut, but you don't have to worry about that whatsoever. This is what your portion of support is. Now, the other part, Deadly Marker, is it can be cleansed, so just be aware of that, especially for yourself as well. If you're getting Deadly Markered by an enemy player, you do want to cleanse it because it can be impactful to your survivability at that point. So definitely Deadly Marker, not to be slept on, absolutely important. Don't care about the hit. Don't care about the cooldown speed. Those are just extra benefits. Cool, yippee yay. You can see here in my build, I do not take any specialization points. The extra 150 hit chance, it doesn't matter. Let's be completely real. And if it did matter enough, then like your DPS players need to find a way to get that extra. And not to mention it's 5 spec points, and you're going to see in my build here, I'm very spec points starved. Like, I would give anything in the world to have 5 extra. So for me, there's not a single thing you're bringing when it comes to Deadly Markers points. All right, let's talk about the next thing. This is probably my second favorite skill, if not my favorite skill in the entire bar. It's Purifying Touch. Purifying Touch is very straightforward. It's your Dispel, so it's going to be removing weakens and removing debuffs. Now, you notice I said removing debuffs as well, not just weakens, because it does some more things than that. Um, Purifying Touch also increases users' attack speed, which is really cool. So if you're pocketing somebody, you want to be using it on them almost constantly because it is going to give them a attack speed boost, and 30% is quite a lot, or 27%, whatever. And then when you're using it on yourself too, you're still getting that as well. So it has a lot of extra features to that too. Now, when it comes to the spec points, I know some of these are going to be a little controversial. Some of these might be a little bit opposite of what you're running. Um, I will say, and I mentioned it in my previous video, your number one job as a seeker is to manage weakens. It's not to be healing, it's to be managing weakens. Now, you're going to see my philosophy with that on this build, where you removing weakens is going to be removing and healing as well, right? But get out of your mindset of, oh, I'm the seeker, I'm the primary healer in the party. No, because you have oracles, you have other ways of sustaining and, shields and so forth, and a lot of times the damage just happens so fast. You can save, so like certainly don't mishear what I'm saying there, but your number one job is to manage weakens. The first spec point here that costs 5 is the 50% chance to remove an additional debuff. That is absolutely massive. If somebody wants to do the math and be very smart about it, you might have a 20-minute Boonstone fight or a 15-minute whatever it is Boonstone fight, and Purifying Touch is on a 6-second cooldown. And that means you're going to have almost 9 of these skills used in a period of 1 minute. And that means 4 out of 5, or 4 out of 9, 5 out of 9, whatever the ratio is going to have half of them removing an additional debuff. Like, this is absolutely an essential perk point to have in there. You do not want to deviate from that. You absolutely want to have the additional debuff. The next one is cooldown speed. You need the additional cooldown speed. You want that to be on as short of cooldown as possible because you're going to be spamming that all the time. Like, this skill should be on damn near cooldown. Healing touch. Now this one's very interesting, and I like it a lot, and I use it all the time. Uh, Applies one heal touch to the target upon removal. So here's the tricky part, and the fun part is if you get really good at cleansing and you're very consistent with it and you're spamming that skill all the time, this is a way to manage your healing touch cooldown and add additional healing touches to your party members without even touching healing touch. So let's say, for example, you're in a party that's pretty tanky, and you might only be really worried about like 1 or 2 DPS players plus yourself and maybe an Oracle in your party, right? While you're cleansing your tanks occasionally of those fire debuffs or the heal cut debuffs or whatever they're going through, you're going to be applying heal touches, which is then going to be applying 700 to 1500 depending on your heavy chance range, right? Is going to be applying healing to them during that entire time they're up there fighting and doing their thing, and a lot of times they're out of range from you, so that you're not going to be up there. You also don't typically want to waste a healing touch on a tank. Like, let's be completely real, it's kind of a waste. Um, so you can then be using either your healing touch for your, other party members, kind of double stacking them up very quickly, or you could be factoring in swift heal, which is a great thing. So I like that a lot. For me, like I said, like it's a very efficient way for me to help my party manage the the healing touch stacks because it's another source of providing healing touch on a very short cooldown. It's a skill I'm using anyway all the time. Even if they're at 3 healing touch stacks, this is going to refresh the stacks to, whatever your buff duration is. So, mine's like 13 seconds, for example. So this is going to extend it back up to 13 seconds. Like, this is a very, very awesome. Like, this is a great perk point. Would absolutely recommend it. Let's talk about Healing Touch now, because we just talked about that for a minute. I don't use any perk points on Healing Touch. I don't know if I'm like really weird about that. I think there's maybe a couple that are actually kind of interesting, and let's talk about those. Duration increase with Flash Wave. Yeah, I mean I can see why you would want this. If you have a spare 3 points, go for it. This would maybe be what I were to use if we got an additional specialization points down the road. I would maybe bring this then. But for me, this is something I don't have in my build. And the other thing too is with the high enough buff duration, you're already getting 13-second healing touches. Like, how much more time do you need? Like, you can manage your entire party solo with healing touches. at those levels, right? And with cooldown speed and buff duration scaling so high now, I don't think the benefit there is huge. This one's kind of interesting. I do think this is neat. This basically gives a flat heal when the healing touch ends. Theoretically, you should be managing your healing touches. I let my healing touches drop quite frequently, I'll be very honest with you, because I do swift heal so much. This to me is not a huge deal. It's also hard to time. It might just go into a full health and then half a second later take a massive burst. I definitely would not say this is worth 7 points. Like, this is absolutely awful from a value standpoint. Mana, if you're having mana issues, I don't know what to tell you. Get a heroic wand. Concentration stance, this is just for liberators. Don't even worry about this. You should not have this on your skill bar whatsoever. So let's talk about the next one. We have Invincible Wall. Invincible Wall, it probably has two whole different conversations. Number one, if you have a Cordy wand, you want your Invincible Wall to probably be AoE 99% of the time. So I definitely would recommend having Invincible Wall set to the AoE target expanded option. So that way all your party members are going to get the CC immunity effect, which is quite amazing. If you're a Oracle or you're a Seeker and you're just really only pocketing one person, for a very long time I did run solo wall, but nowadays, especially the Seeker's role in the party isn't really to be the primary healer, as well as in the sense of like the mitigation, and it's not all our responsibility anymore because now there's oracles. So for me, I think the value is better being able to provide that Cordy wand to everyone in the party. And the nice thing is the Cordy wand impacts you, so that way you're going to be immune to those stuns, you're going to be immune to those CCs, you're going to be immune to those silences, which are just extra benefits for you, keeping your party alive. It's definitely noticeable. So I personally would use target expanded, but if you are a specific Seeker out there, you are running solo and you think you have a very good argument to it, I wouldn't tell you you're wrong at all. 5 meter range increase. Um, Kind of the same thing as the healing touch conversation. Cool if I had 3 points. This is neat, but I wouldn't use it. You just don't have points. So, I mean, it's cool. It's probably like B tier, C tier kind of thing, but there's no way I'm taking that over anything else. Evasion endurance increase. If we watched the previous video, we talked about how endurance is kind of a shitty stat, and you don't really need that much of it to matter. You don't want to run this. It's 3 points. It's not a lot. Theoretically, again, if you had an extra 20 points to put into the build, you bring it, but I don't think this is a value whatsoever. Flash Wave, probably the coolest skill to leech kills and kill assist. So Flash Wave, you absolutely want to be taking the perk point to actually creates as a heal. The only time I've ever used Flash Arrow, which is once in my entire time playing this game, was when I was guarding dungeon in castle defense. But it was so ass that anytime we are actually going to fight, I would have to sit there and swap it back and forth. So you want Flash Wave. Flash Wave just gives an amazing heal over time. It also does a pretty good damage range. It also gets you assist if you're using it more offensively. Don't expect to really kill people with it. It's more for healing. Range increase. When I was a brand new player, I thought this was the shiz, and then within a week of me starting the game, I was like, this is not it. You don't need it. Don't worry about it. Just get really efficient at your movement and your placement around your party, and I promise you'll be able to hit 4 to 6 people with your Flash Wave almost 100% of the time without the range increase and the width. Blind, sorry. I actually think this would be really cool. I mean, you got to hit people, and the people that you're going to be hitting, uh, they're not really the problems. It's going to be evasion players that you're not going to hit with this because they have too much range evasion. I wouldn't bring it. You can clearly see I don't. I don't want to talk a whole lot about things I don't bring, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting, but I want to bring it. Effect duration. I could see possibly not using this, but 3 seconds matters a lot, and I actually think it scales on buff duration. So if you're at 100% buff duration, I actually think it extends it by 6. You can kind of see here. Let me do maybe 1 or 2 of these. So you'll see I'll have my survival enhancement on. I'll prep my flash wave, cook it, And you can see my flash wave, I missed it because I was dyslexic and didn't look in the right place, but I want to guess it was probably around that 22-second mark for flash wave, which is fantastic. Now, let's say you don't have the mastery perk points. You can see that my base one's about 19-20 seconds in duration. So you absolutely want the longer the flash wave, the better. Theoretically, too, you can see my cooldown's only 17 seconds, so I have 100% uptime on flash wave, and that's including the casting time. I want Flash Wave to be ticking on everybody as much as often. You can see here it's ticking for almost 5,000, 5,500, whatever the range was. If you add that up over 20 seconds and the player's actually taking damage those whole seconds, you're talking about 100,000 healing just on Flash Wave alone in one cast every 16 seconds. So Flash Wave's awesome. Maybe I should mention this as I go along, just in case you don't watch the other video I made. But you do have the ability to heavy your Flash Wave, and you do have your ability to heavy your Healing Touch. They do not scale on crit. Shield does scale on crit, but it does not allow heavy. In T2 and T1 it did allow heavy, but it does not anymore in T3. It's very sad. It was very broken. I was doing heavy shields for 24,000 in T2. It was a lot of fun. Very much enjoyed it. Big sad. Alright, let's jump into the next one. I think this is one of our first wand skills, actually. Fountain of Life. Fountain of Life, everyone loves it. Everyone uses it. A couple things about this one. The first perk point, mana recovery, absolute trash. I hate it. Every time I see a Seeker in PvP use it, I cringe because I know they're wasting 5 points into something that is so bad. And here's why it's bad, is the mana recovery is only 40. So, if I... am I able to get this on here? So it does 12 ticks at 40, so you're recovering, about 600 mana at most? That's horrible. Like, 600 mana is like 2 skills on a DPS player. That's also assuming they're sitting in the mana pool the entire time. If you're a healer and you've never played a DPS class before, I promise you they're barely ever paying attention to where your fountain is. And if they are, they're really good and they don't need your mana. So for me, this is a hard no. I know a lot of healers out there that do use it. I know oracles do like it. For me, it's an absolute no on Seeker. Now, the next perk is going to be range increase. This just basically increases the width of the fountain. It doesn't increase your cast range. This is really nice because, again, similar problem. Your DPS are running in and out of the effect range. You want the DPS to have as wide of a range as possible, so that way you can kind of manage that accordingly. This is an absolute must-have, in my opinion. If you have like a little baby fountain, I will judge you, so please use the range increase perk. Effect duration, if I had 7 points, this is probably what I would take in the game at this point, like easily. Like, this would be really nice to have. It's just very difficult for me to grab this. We're going to talk about swift healing a little bit, but like if you're not a big swift healer, maybe changing some of these points into that would be the play. But Fountain of Life, it has a good duration already. I wish I had the extra 2 seconds, but I understand where my limitations are with it, so I'm not super worried about not having that. But this is a great perk. I would rate this probably like A tier, S tier, along with other stuff. It's just I don't have the my playstyle. Just I can't fit this in. Now, a couple things about Fountain real quick, and we'll kind of talk about this as we kind of go along around like best practices and so forth. You can use Fountain for your DPS players. I know a lot of healers that are really good at the game. They actually use their Fountain a little bit more selfishly. So, if you're kind of feeling a little bit of pressure, you're going to have like a lot of attention on you, don't be afraid to drop it for yourself. Like, you absolutely can throw it. Like, if I see like one of my melees over here getting guillotined by, a DPS player, I'm going to throw my fountain over there. Now, I have the habit of running into my fountain, so I typically will be in my fountain and positioning myself into the fountain as I can. So I do think there's a lot of value there with that, and I would recommend using your fountain a little bit more selfishly. What I do in comms with my party is, if I drop it selfishly and nobody's really around me at the time I drop it, I will call out, hey, I dropped fountain, fountain on heart, or fountain on star, whatever your icon is. So that way your party knows, hey, there's a fountain there. If I use it more aggressively, like on my tank or on my DPS player, same exact conversation goes. I'm going to say, hey, fountain under, skull, or whatever the case may be. So don't be afraid to use it in different situations differently, as long as you're communicating and your team kind of knows what your plan is with that. Um, Blitz is amazing. This is fantastic. Funnily enough, this is actually probably the only skill I have changed in T3. I did not. I'm kind of embarrassed to admit it now, to be honest with you. I didn't use the cooldown speed reduction on this um, in T2, and I have in T3, and I love it. So, Limit Break basically allows you to not only blitz the skill, so you have the ability to reuse it immediately, but it also changes some of the aspects to your skills that you're able to use. Now, the cool thing about Limit Break is when you use it, so like you can see I use Healing Touch, Limit Break, well, I get the effect on any of the skills that are impacted by it. So that's, Purifying Touch, Healing Touch, and Flash Wave. So if I were to use, Purifying Touch, it would remove all. So it's fantastic. You definitely want to be using it. The reason why, number one, you probably bring this over anything else is because you have the ability to remove every debuff on a person with the Purifying Touch. Now, I have seen people in Discord and so forth comment about, oh, it only removes one line of weekends. Um, that's probably true. I haven't really tested it. I haven't really noticed it. For me, it's not really a big deal, to be completely honest with you, because you should theoretically be managing your weekends to a point where it doesn't get that bad. And if you're the person, because that does happen, where you have like 100 people on you and they're hitting you and you're just Q blocking and trying to survive out there in the world, and you're watching your weekends be stacking up so high, yeah, that sucks. But you absolutely want to bring this. And I will tell you a couple things about this. So when I do use the Blitz, I do probably most commonly use Purifying Touch with the enhanced version to completely weaken removal somebody. Now, if I'm very aware of what the pace of the fight is and I'm very aware of the situation, I might do the upgraded Healing Touch, and we'll talk about that in a second. And sometimes I will do Flash Wave, just if I know if it's really early or there's like a lull in the fight, and I know there'll probably be like a period of like 6 seconds where we're kind of disengaged, and I really don't need the flash, or I don't need the Purifying Touch, I really don't need the Healing Touch version. I might cook the Enhanced Flash Wave because the Enhanced Flash Wave is quite nice. It does quite a bit of healing. So that's kind of my prioritization order of the enhanced skills. Now, this is an interesting one because I have seen different opinions about this. What skills do you blitz? Now, this is very interesting. There's a lot of different ways. In the past, I was more consistent on blitzing my Purifying Touch because I wanted to manage weekends. Now, what I found I was doing was I would cleanse somebody, blitz my cleanse, and then full cleanse the same person immediately after. Well, if you think about that logic, it's not really efficient of what you're doing. So you kind of wasted the first Purifying Touch because you just used the Blitz one immediately afterwards. So I wasn't a big fan of going Purifying Touch into Blitz. What I have begun doing, or I have for quite a while now actually, but since T2, really I blitz Invincible Wall, and the reason why is because I do have a Cordy Wand, so my party gets the CC immunity, and I'll recast it, and they get the CC immunity again. Depending on where your buff duration is, this might add up to be 8 seconds of complete CC immunity if you are good at your timing. You will see that Invincible Wall only has a 15-second cooldown. You're talking a good amount of time with Cordy effect being in place, especially if you have a second healer in your party with Cordy Wand. So you absolutely, in my opinion, I value blitzing Invincible Wall the most. I do know that there's healers out there that do blitz their Nature's Blessings, especially in T2 that was very common. Once in a while I will blitz Clays, but the only reason I really do that is when I'm really needing a lot of massive healing, or I need the AoE weaken removal, which we'll talk about specialization points later. I do blitz Flash Wave, and I'll be the first person to admit this. When you actually screw it up with, the casting against a wall or something, that's when you do a no shame blitz on your Flash Wave and get the correct one out there. Just don't be that guy that screws it up 2 times in a row. But I would typically blitz Invincible Wall. Now, if you don't have a Cordy Wand, there's really no value in blitzing Invincible Wall. It's really not a very effective skill for you at that point. I would say probably blitzing Purifying Touch, blitzing Flash Wave to make sure everybody in the party has it. Maybe even blitzing Blessed Barrier or Valenus Barrier, or even going to standard route Nature's Blessing. You have a lot more options if you don't have a Cordy Wand. But if you have a Cordy Wand and you're not blitzing Invincible Wall, I really don't know what you're blitzing otherwise. Like, there's really nothing worth it. Like, the Nature's Blessing cooldown is managed so nicely with the effect. You really don't want to double up the alot bow effects and so forth. So that's just my take on that. All right, we'll dive back into this. Swift healing. This is probably where I disagree with the most people in the game on, as far as anything in the game goes. So I swift heal a lot. I swift heal constantly. Because I'm using the Purifying Touch, Healing Touch, that gives me the flexibility to interweave swift heals into my cooldowns. And swift heal does a ton of healing. If you're a seeker and you're not running 4-piece ethereal, which we talked about, you're going to be in that like 160 range healing typically with 4-piece ethereal. That's a lot of healing. And, a lot of times, whoever you're going to be swift healing, it's going to have your blessed barrier on them anyway because of just, the purpose of the pace of the fight and so forth. Or you're going to be holding your blessed barrier to be a little bit more reactive with it for those situations. And let me kind of just show you a little bit. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to get my Selfless Soul stacks. I'm going to try to do this in a way. Okay, I can't. So let me get my Selfless Soul stacks up so you guys can see. And I'm going to Bless Barrier myself and I'm going to Swift Heal. So 8,000, 5,500. We have 14,000, 21,000, 24,000. And this is without Saint's Oath. This is obviously not being very optimal in how you're doing this and so forth. But Swift Heal, in the middle of a fight with every buff going on, you're fully buffed out, you got food and everything, it will heal for about 50,000 if you are running a decent bit of heavy chance. And I'm talking like 5 to 600 heavy chance, right? 50,000 healing. Now, you might be saying, well, useless. How am I going to manage my healing touch stacks if I don't have the cooldown because I'm swift healing, right? Well, number one, you have Purifying Touch. If you were to remove a weaken, it would update the healing touch stack. You're also running a very high buff duration of 100% plus, so that way your healing touches are running like a 12-second timer. And what else are you doing with that? Like, you can manage 2 people's healing touch on the cooldown of 1 healing touch, essentially. So, especially when you start interweaving the Purifying Touch. So, for me, healing, Swift Heal is absolutely a skill that you should be using. Like I said, like, I know that varies a lot for person to person. If you're just simply not going to do it, I don't blame you for it. For me, it's just not very optimal. There's a lot of times when I'm in battlegrounds or war games, and I'll look in the first minute of a fight, I'll have triple the healing of other Seekers because I swift healed in the first fight, and that might have been 30 to 40,000 effective healing from that one skill, while everything else is already going on. So Swift Healing for me, I don't sleep on it. I think it's fantastic. If you do PvE, you probably are Swift Healing quite a bit. So you should definitely be using it then too. So the perk points will differ drastically depending on whether or not you bring this skill and are effectively using it. So let's talk about the perk points for Swift Healing. Healing transfers, yeah, I mean, you just want more healing. It's more self-sustained for yourself. There's nothing reason why you would not bring this if you're using Swift Healing consistently. If you're not bringing Swift Healing consistently, or you're not using it, then probably not worth the 10 points for sure. 3 times in a row, same exact conversation as the previous perk. If you're not bringing Swift Healing or you're not commonly using it, you're very comfortable not using it, then I don't blame you at all for this. Um, the one thing I will say is, if you're sitting here watching this video and you're saying, well, I don't use that and I heal very fine, right? Like I have no problem healing. What I would tell you is try Swift Healing for a couple days in PvP settings and come back and tell me that you're feeling like you're healing the same amount as when you weren't using it. Because there are so many times where I'll see my DPS players at, you know, 5k health on a health bar of 30,000, and Swift Heal's the thing getting them back up to 30,000 in, 2 clicks. Healing Touch is not. My Oracle's not because they can only really apply shields, and then they only do like 5,000 heals. Like, that's the other factor to Swift Heal in T3 is your Oracles are doing a lot of preventive healing. You need to be really there to be the reactive healing. And if you're not bringing Swift Heal, you're not bringing the perk points for it, and you're not utilizing it because you're just sitting there stacking healing touches like this is T2, then you're going to be sitting there with the Pokemon meme face asking, well, why did my DPS die? Or, I can't heal my tank with 60,000 health very effectively. Well, if you Bless Barrier them, you cleanse them, right? So you remove all the healing reductions, and then you throw 3 Swift Heals into them, that's their health bar. And then you can move on. You don't have to sit there constantly healing, touching them, constantly cleansing them because they're on the very verge of survival. So for me, Swift Heal is definitely something I bring. Skill range, in T2 I did use this. I don't use it anymore. Very nice to have, but I ain't got 3 points. Mana recovery, if you want to be a mana recovery person, and like you're sitting there using the mana recovery Fountain of Life, just bring this. This thing heals like 200 to 500 mana every time you Swift Heal somebody. So if you're using it 3 times in a row, you're going to transfer, on average, about 700 to probably 1100 mana on those 3 skill uses, which takes 4 seconds on a cooldown, right? So it's a very effective way to mana regenerate your DPS players. I used to use it a ton when I had Scorpions or Shadow Dancers or other people that starved on mana constantly. I specifically changed my build to be able to support them better at the cost to myself. Your job as a healer is not really to heal, it's to be a support player. It's about enabling your DPS to be as efficient as possible. And if they're running around with no mana, guess what? They're not going to be killing the enemy DPS players, which then are going to be targeting you or them, and everyone's in bad shape because they just don't have mana. So if you want to mana control and you are upset that I talked about removing the mana recovery off your Fountain of Life, just grab this. It's like the same thing, if not 10,000 times better. Okay. Tell me if you use Swift Heal. I'm very curious to see what the reactions to that are. Clays of Salvation. Kind of, you know, basic talk track. I think there's only 2 things I feel like would be controversial here. Um, Janus's Rage is actually really good. I know a lot of people that use it. I know a lot of oracles or the seeker in the party. Usually, like one person will take it and the other one uses the heal. I don't think there's anything wrong with this. I would have no problem doing it. Maybe perhaps I'm still stuck in the T2 mentality where I need to be there to be able to heal people. So I haven't committed to dropping my clays for Janus's. But there's just too many times I can count on my hand where I save 2 or 3 people in the party because clays, procs for an insane amount of healing. And when I show you what that insane amount of healing is real quick, is, you look here with Blessed Barrier. I mean, that's 43,000 healing in one skill. And that's for the entire party, assuming it heavies on every single person. Which it won't, but, at least, 2 or 3 people are probably going to have, on average, the heavy effect. Like, again, it's like the conversation of Swift Heal. Like, your job is to be there when you need to be there. And if you convert it to Janus's, yes, your damage is going to be better for your party, and you might even get a little bit of additional healing because it is base damage. But you're not healing 42,000 with that, I promise you. I would say I'm very comfortable if I have a healer join my party and they tell me they're running Janus's. I would never tell them to change it. I would be very comfortable with that as long as I trust them that they know what they're doing. If you're in a guild that isn't as competitive and your DPS do need that extra survivability, I would be bringing clays instead of Janus's, and don't listen to them when they tell you they want more damage. Like, if they're not running glass already, then that's their problem. So I would recommend keeping the clays on, but Janus is cool. Weaken removal, again, the number one job of you is to take weaken removal effects, and this is an AoE version, so theoretically this is removing 6 weakens. Especially in fights or situations where I know I'm not going to be sitting there in need of clays right in that moment, I do use clays sometimes as a weaken removal tool. So even if I'm only missing, 5,000 health, or my DPS player is only missing a chunk of health, I will proc this if I'm noticing weaken stack throughout the party, or one person has a specific weaken I'm very scared of, say like a Tev1, for example. So I absolutely think this is a must carry. You should absolutely be picking this. And don't be afraid to use your clays a little bit more precautionary versus like holding it for the last minute save. Like I said, if you watch back some of my VODs and so forth on my channel, you will see that I use clays as a stun removal for scorpions and so forth, because the heal is not going to save them, but the weaken will. The weaken removal, that is, especially if they're stunned and things like that. So you definitely want to bring this. There's no question. Range increase, pretty bad. You should have pretty good range on your clays. And it costs points that you really don't have. Maybe if you're not bringing all the swift healing stuff, you can grab that and grab the invincible wall, but that's not an option for me. Nature's Blessing, this one should be not controversial, so shouldn't need to spend too much time on this. Vigorous, if you're running healer, you should be running this. There's absolutely no question about that. This is what actually procs the effective healing from the skill. You want to bring this. Now, just so you know, and everyone's kind of on the same page, the spear skill that like strips vigorous and like healing touches and so forth, if you are using vigorous on your nature's blessing, which you should be, it reapplies in between every removal that their spear's doing, so it does block the removal effect consistently. It's a little RNG. It's not like as simple as saying, well, if you have vigorous, it's going to prevent it 100% of the time, but it does drastically slow down that. So don't be afraid of being like, well, that can get stripped and so forth. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, run vigorous. You're crazy if you're not. Same thing about cooldown speed. You want cooldown speed because this removes weakens as well, on top of the point that it decreases the cooldown. And again, your number one job as a seeker is to manage weakens. So fantastic benefit there. The whirlpool, I have like 3,000 hours. I still don't really know what the hell Whirlpool does. I think it does like movement speed and cooldown speed or something. But you don't want to bring this. It's not very good. It's just not worth it. I think this is more for like DPS players. Blessed Barrier. Kind of very similar to Clay's and Janice's. So first of all, we'll talk about Valorous Barrier. If you have two healers in your party, I personally do prefer having one run Valorous and one run Blessed, just because you can't see your other healers' debuff timer on being able to apply the Blessed Barrier. So for me, I always run Blessed Barrier. I ask my co-healers to run Valorous. The reason why is because I am swift healing so often and I am using the base version of Clay's for healing. I want to make sure that I'm applying the maximum effect of Blessed Barrier as possible. The other thing too is, in my builds, I always run very high buff duration. So my buff duration is almost the same duration as Blessed Barrier. The debuff that is. If I were to actually bring this spec point here, my Blessed Barrier would be almost the same time as the 20-second cooldown. So, Blessed Barrier, I still think there's a lot of value even after the nerf, which was the defense and so forth. So I still run it. For me, the real benefit is the healing during the day, obviously, and then it's just extra defense during the night for my people. So, I can't complain about that. But during the day, that healing buff is really nice. It's a huge chunky amount, so it's definitely very good. Um, Targets expanded. I know a couple of healers that use this. Um, it's just not something I would run. I think it would be very difficult to aim it. The other thing too is, if I notice a person in my party out of my screen, I know I can cast Bless Barrier on them just using the targeted version. But this is not bad. I don't think this is bad. I know a couple really good healers that use it. Unless you're very good with your targeting, don't touch it. Like, it will be more of a con to you. You'll miss people and waste a skill. If you're very comfortable with it, then I can understand that. I think it's really cool then. Duration increased. I wish I had the 5 points. I picked this up in a heartbeat. I ran this in T2 the entire time, and it was amazing. I loved it. So I think it's great. I just don't have the points for it, which I'm very sad about. Enchanting Time, and we'll wrap it up from there when it comes to the skills. So Enchanting Time, the base version is Time for Punishment, which is a curse that reduces the weaken resistance. You don't want to run the basic version. It's not your job. You're not going to have a high weaken chance. Yes, you could probably weaken DPS players, but it just isn't worth it. The other problem is on the side or back, it does damage with it, which then means it's going to run as a hit check and not a weaken check. So you want to be very careful of that. You should not be using the base version. So let's talk about Enchanting Time. Enchanting Time just boosts your skill damage by 220 for the target, and it can be used on friendlies. 220 skill damage is quite a bit. We talked about SDR being so essential in the previous video. Well, this is the way to beat people's SDR check. Typically, you want to be using this on your highest performing DPS player in the party. So usually that's Scorpions, usually that's Ravagers. Like it will massively impact their damage. You're talking, possibly a, 10%, 20% skill damage boost on their skills if they're exceeding checks, or it just will be able to make them match the check. So huge value for DPS players having the Enchanting Time buff on them. Using it on yourself, in my opinion, is not very valuable. While staying here in Castleton, I won't bother doing it. But with healing touches and so forth, it's a very minor improvement on your quantity of your healing. So healing does not scale very highly with skill damage boost. I use it on myself on accident a lot, but it just kind of is what it is. Keep in mind too, and we'll talk about masteries later, because this is already 46 minutes. Enchanting Time does give the person a shield, which is really cool. It's like a little baby shield, but hey, 2200 health, I'll take that. The other nice thing too is the 2200 health will stack along with the other shields. So now you're talking, oh, hey, 7500 health, not too bad. So I definitely would recommend that. And let's take a look at that. Effect duration, you definitely don't need this. You should have 100% uptime on your Enchanting Time. You should absolutely not take this perk. There's no reason to. Burning Time, please do not be running Burning Time if you're a healer. Like, maybe if, like, the last remaining enemy healer is standing there and nobody can kill him, and you want to kill him or you need to kill him for some reason, you're in Grimturd or Exodus, and there's, like, an annoying healer tank in there your whole guild's trying to kill, they can't. Okay, maybe swap to Burning Time, those, like, weird, rare situations, but you will not be able to land this skill very frequently on the people you want to. And the Enchanting Time is such a higher value. This is very selective towards builds that are designed to mana burn, um, and I'll leave it at that for that. I won't go further into that in this video. So, Enchanting Time is really good. Now, I didn't even think about the passives. You should be running these passives. There's no other choice. I'm sorry. there's really no other option here. I don't know what you would even take over this. The only thing I've ever seen somebody talk about is running the corruption, and then I think it's like trying to run like healing or touch of despair or like magic circle or whatever it is to like get the weaken the proc for your base damage increase or whatever. Not worth it at all. Don't do that. This is really valuable. I know you're probably looking at this like, oh my god, useless. You don't running curses. This is such a huge waste. Well, guess what? When you take the blue Celestial Boost perk, it actually converts your Clays and Invincible Wall and your Fountain of Life to increase it by 15%. So huge benefit there. You definitely want that. There's no doubt about that. I've seen Seekers in the past in PvE use this. You can see mine's level 1. Never equipped it. If you're standing still, you're dead. Don't use this. It's so bad. Please don't use this. There's absolutely no benefit to it. And then everything else, please don't use those either. They're horrible. I think the only other thing I want to talk about in this video, just because of timing, is I do want to talk about Flash Wave real quick. And the reason being is I think there's a lot of miscommunication and misinformation out there regarding Flash Wave. And a lot of it is kind of just a skill issue to some degree. So what I'm trying to do right now, and I probably went the wrong way, is I'm trying to find some elevation, like a roof I can get on or something. Oh, I think there's a place over here. So Flash Wave can be used from elevation to hit enemies or allies reliably. It just takes a little bit of skill and a little bit of awareness on what you're doing. So when you're on a higher elevation, traditionally, if I'm trying to Flash Wave Naughty here, which I don't have anybody in my party or guild to ask to come on at 7 a.m., traditionally your guild's going to be like, oh, don't Flash Wave. I remember I did a VOD review when I was really new as a player, and they had a person in the guild, it wasn't me, they did Flash Wave from the roof, and the guild like made memes of it and called the guy out and said, oh, it just went like straight up into the air and like over there at the gate and stuff like that. They were making fun of him like hardcore. Now looking back at that months later, they're really stupid because that's just wrong. So here's how you aim Flash Wave. So if you cast Flash Wave, it looks like that. What this means is that line on the ground there, it is actually landing there and going flat at that angle. So let me show you again. So you can kind of see when I push it further out, this section towards this walkway here is not covered in the Flash Wave because it does not have the green lines indicating it on the sides. So when you are casting it, depending on your placement of your mouse, you can adjust it on elevation as long as your targets, both friendly and enemy, are within that line, then they will be able to get the benefit. Let me see if I can get really lucky and this guy's actually here and accept some party invite. If not, I'll just cast it again. So you can see right here, it would work. Here it would not work because I'm out of range. It would actually be hitting over there flat on the ground, actually, is how that will work. So don't be afraid to use your flash waves on the roof. I do it very frequently because I understand how it's going to work, and it works very, very well. Let me see if I can get this guy. See if I can get him to come over here. Alright, so we have our volunteer. So he's a little bit of a tricky spot, but you can see flash wave worked perfectly fine because I made sure that he was in between the things. Alright, and we'll say thank you to Bexby from DMTG on the Stellarite server. Thank you for your valuable help. So don't be afraid to use your flash wave. It's really valuable with that, especially in Siege if you're playing up on those roofs around central res point. Yeah, be using your flash wave. Don't just sit there and stand up there and waste it. So that's a huge pro tip right there. I think that's fantastic information. Oh, I'll mention one more thing, and we'll kind of cut this video off, about 55 minutes hopefully. So let's talk about Guardians real quick, and then we'll end it. So, in my opinion, every single person in your party, including your DPS players and including your tank, I guess, should be running the lady here, which is a AoE shield of 7,000 for your entire party. Be careful, this does not stack anymore, so if you use this when your Oracle used this, it'll cause some issues, and one of them is pretty much wasted at that point. So kind of stagger your party from using this, but this is huge. This is amazing. Again, it's a shield. We all know shields are very strong in T3. And then also, it does impact healing and, defenses and so forth, but those are all very minor. I know a lot of people are running this, which is cool. It's not bad, but it's selfish. Your job as a healer is to put output for your party. So when I'm using this, it might be because my party is in danger or I'm in danger. And in the end of the day, that's what's most important. The other thing too is you're going to have about 14,000 health, or sorry, mana, I mean, and this scales off your mana. So the shield healths are exactly the same. You're just not getting the cooldown speed, but you should have high enough cooldown speed that the difference is very minor. The only other thing I've used in the past in T2 is this guy, just because I was using lots of healing clays and so forth. But I really primarily used it as a CC removal. So if I saw my Scorpion was guillotined, or getting guillotined and they were stunned, I would actually use this to break the stun. But I wouldn't use it in T3. I think you'd be more efficient just giving your entire party a 7,000 health. That will probably create them the ability to survive in that moment anyway. So you should be using this. I'll probably be doing another video possibly tomorrow, and what I'll do in that one is I'm going to kind of go into the mastery points, and kind of deep dive into those. That should be a lot easier conversation. I don't think there's a lot of changes in there that you'll have to do in your builds, and then we'll talk about maybe some miscellaneous items like artifacts and so forth. But for right now, I think that's it, and thank you again for tuning into my second video. So hopefully this continues to be helpful for all of you. If you think I need to change, a format or something along those lines, please let me know. And thank you again.